What's up everyone, and welcome to the meta forecast for the 5v5 half of set 5. This is the season I was trash talking a lot, especially on the Jabba podcast. I was not happy, I was not excited. Set 4 ended up being probably one of my most miserable seasons playing this game. It was like the first time that I had gone negative. It was just like, Lord Vader seemed impossible. It didn't seem like there were many theory crafting angles, and so yeah, I thought set 5 was gonna be kind of whatever. I was ready to just, mentally just get through the season and get it over with and let set 4 expire and move on. And yeah, I mean, apologies for this being late, but the reason why this is late is the same reason why there's so much to talk about today, because kind of late in the game before lock-in, I realized that there were a great deal of angles that were kind of sitting waiting to be found, especially if you're working towards Afra. There is, I think, a lot to be happy about here. And this also is going to be a little bit of a different forecast in that there is some decision making to do. I am not necessarily running all of these teams. You can see yourself. There's a mall up here, there's a mall down here. Which one will you do? That's you. The nice thing about this being 1 week delayed is that I have now run a lot of these teams for a week, and I can tell you how these teams are doing. And let me tell you, some of these teams are doing. It's put it this way. We had 3 matches. One opponent could not clear. The other 2 opponents bled 150 banners. So that's a pretty big banner margin to try to win. But yeah, there's a lot of teams we're talking about, I think, so let's get into it. First off, honestly, as much as there is to talk about, I don't think there's much to say for Lord Vader. Hey, it's Lord Vader with set 4. It turns out that's pretty good. The one thing I would note here is, please, for the love of God, if you are using Inquisitors and you have Grand Inquisitor, and you're like trying to use it against Jabba, please stop posting 8th brother in this team. It should be second sister. The moment that set 1 expired, second sister became the worst Inquisitor by a healthy margin. It's supposed to be 8th brother. Run 8th brother, stop using second sister. It'll stop timing out as much, I promise. That's all I have to say for this team. It's dodge, it's Lord Vader, it's Thrawn. It can screw up SLK pretty badly. That's why I mirrored the season, which is why we'll get to this a little bit, but that is why I have chosen to hold Lord Vader and post this Maul Hondo team, which is doing quite well for me. Anyway, moving right along, this team I am very, very pleased with. So this is Sith Eternal with the Savage Omicron, with the basic concept being that you give a Tenacity Datacron combined with Savage's unique, which gives the team lasting offense and health steal. More importantly, health steal. After he dies, it lasts after he dies. And so your team has all this tenacity so that a Wampa can't apply heal block, a Sith Eternal can't apply shock. And so suddenly these characters just can't get through you. At the same time, there's also 000, who I think is kind of interesting as a way to block Wampa turn meter. Obviously, it's a very hard to obtain a character right now. He just went farmable, so if you don't have him, I wouldn't necessarily sweat it too hard. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have him, you can just flex in Marauder or whoever else. But part of the reason why he is here is because, as you will see throughout the rest of the vid, I am also making a bid to try to literally use every Sith. We're trying to get blood from a stone here and field multiple Sith teams where possible. So we'll see. We'll get there. So yeah, I mean, he's got a black chassis with red eyes. It's Sith-like. You could see there's a bit of thematics there, but yeah. So this team has done insane for me. I think it clocked 16 holds in the first week. We've been in top 8 too, so I would say it's probably pretty good test cases for how the teams are doing. Doesn't necessarily guarantee the same performance for you, but as we talk about, if you can hit this kind of key threshold between Sith Eternals, mods, and Datacron, you're trying to hit about 270%-ish tenacity. That sounds high, but his base is very high, so I mean, you could put it as like, if you give him 80% tenacity Datacron and 80% in mods, that's good enough. Or if you have less in Datacron, you do more in mods. It's a give and take, right? But yeah, it's working very well. Very pleased with that. Quick mention, don't have to go over it too hard at this point. Turbo Qui-Gon continues to be doing well. I think people might be starting to realize the ways to handle him, but I'm not going to say it and will it into existence. So for now, yeah, continues to be a pretty good team. I'm pretty content with it. It's fairly cheap for what it's doing. You know, Ahsoka and GK maybe not so much cheap, but when you're buying banners, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, hey, it's Turbo Qui-Gon. There's nothing new here. It just continues to work pretty well. There might be more of a case to D2 switch to Armor Pen, depending on how people are adapting their strategies here. But for now, it's not really that broken, so I'm not going to touch it. Mandalorians. So after checking my match history, this got holds in all 3 rounds for me. After checking my match history, everyone did Jawas and failed on Hondo last standing into cleanup. So technically speaking, I guess I haven't actually seen this team in action, but I think the premise here is so strong that I'm riding pretty high on this team right now. Basically, the idea is Hondo Omicron gives him a lot of starting turn meter. This kind of gives him a Watt or Droideka style effect where he can get the team rolling quickly. And then you have Bo-Katan, Bam giving the team a lot of extra durability and regen, ways to drag the fight out. You know, Bam Burr's getting a little bit of extra attrition threat. And then you have Hondo. If everything else gets solved, if they deal with Maul, Hondo, especially if you have a good dodge cron to give him, is Hondo. He can do Hondo things. He can just close the fight out himself and roll his sleeves up. I think it's a pretty cool team. It's kind of one of the first times that we've seen a team that feels like 2-in-1. You know, you've got the Hondo dodge angle, you've got the Maul standard angle with an actual starter. You know, there have been some seasons recently where I was just posting Maul leads on defense with no real starter, and that doesn't always necessarily feel great. But Hondo is kind of this team going legit for the first time ever since like set 2 expired, I would say. Set 2 or set 3, so yeah, it's kind of the first time that I saw Hondo and it felt like everything kind of clicked into place. And that feels pretty cool to me. Kind of in vain with Lord Vader, if you're posting Ray Dash, then this is the way that everyone's going. It's nothing fancy. It's dash bonus with Ray with Ben. It's fine. It does what it's supposed to. It's kind of a generic build that everyone's running, but yeah, I figured I'd mention it. It's one of those meta staples, right? So much of this page is about there's meta staples and then there's off angles. And this is definitely just a staple with nothing really fancy does it need to talk about here. This is where the takes get a little bit hotter. So I am making a bid and efforts to try to split off Malgus and DR. If you don't have every Sith in the game, you probably just run Malgus DR. But if you don't, or if you do, then you can run, I guess it's supposed to be a Maul here. We'll fix that before the video comes out, but at this point, the footage is live, so. Yeah, the whole idea that I'm going for here is I'm kind of trying to interfere with bounty hunters. So we have Sith Assassins to kind of speed Maul up, Maul AoE days and other factors to try to get in the way. We just don't want bounty hunters to get their nuke off. We're trying to go a cheap Malgus that kind of makes them pay more than they want to, right? I mean, you know, as of my match history last week, everyone's just using stuff like Darth Vader anyway, but I see no real reason to try to run Malgus Darth Vader or Darth Revan if they're just going to use Darth Vader anyway. So yeah, this is a part of the experiment, mostly because it's not that I feel good about this team so much as I feel pretty good about this team, right? This is kind of the real end game here is, yeah, Darth Revan just continues to feel good as like a, if you can successfully run him separately. There's a lot to like here. He's pretty happy with set 4 dodge. He's pretty happy with set 5 armor and stats like that. Yeah, dude just having a good time. A lot of people have been running this DR plus TFP cron, and it's been causing a lot of mess for me. I have been able to beat it with Starkiller, but TFP really just adds some extra mess to the mix. If you don't have him, you could just run like a classic Stonewall style setup, I think. Nothing really wrong with that, but yeah, I'm gonna try running some TFP flavor this week. I haven't run this last week, so I can't really speak too much of it, but I fought it. And pretty much every single time it was like Starkiller with 2 to 3 people left standing with like horrible banners. So that's a pretty good impression on me. Yeah, CLS with dodge continuing to kind of do pretty well, but I would say less effectively than gas. Did I just give up for gas? I don't I mean, yeah, it's kind of the same thing, right? Dodge gas has been a meta staple. Nothing too surprising there. CLS doesn't make as good of a usage of the dodge as gas does. You know, Grievous, for example, can't be evaded. And then the rest of his team, you know, kind of has benefits for if you get dodged. So, right, it's less clean, but it can still cause a mess. And more importantly, it will mess up people who try to run Iden. So, you know, I tiered this team down a bit. You know, penalize them for it a little bit, but I do think it's worth noting. Shakti, kind of in the same vein, right next to CLS here is, it's kind of known at this point, but I won't necessarily say that Bad Batch has a higher calling on offense. Shakti kind of can. And it's not that Shock Batch is bad to have an offense. It's actually pretty solid, but as the meta feels like it's getting a little bit more top heavy, at least where I'm at playing, I've had less use cases for them. So, you know, I could see still running them on defense for now. I haven't really had a high calling for Bad Batch beyond like killing Radis. And Geos could do that. So it's not, right. We're not posting Geos on defense. Maybe you could post Bad Batch. But again, I have not been posting Shock Batch in week 1. It's just, I think that they're still pretty okay to run if we get there. Moving along. So I'm gonna be honest, I was actually riding really low on Iden the last few weeks. I think I jinxed it by saying like, hey, why aren't you all running Iden yet? This is insane. Wampa was set 5, specifically with crit damage, has kind of been kind of a cheat code for him. And so, you know, with set 5, just getting something like 30% crit damage is not that hard. You can get horrifically more crit damage than that if you really want to. And to the point where I don't think that there's, within realistic means, much that Iden can do to stop it. What we're doing instead now is we are running a hybrid tenacity potency datacron. We are running mixed tenacity and tankiness Shore. We are running mixed damage and potency Iden. And the hope is that we can at least deny Wampa his usual toy, or they just won't realize it as a potency Iden after all, and they'll just go in and lose. That I got that this week. It worked. But right, it's kind of Iden needing to be a little bit more scrappy now that Wampa has an easy button, right? It's not necessarily a lost matchup, but it's gonna take a little bit more effort. So we'll see. I haven't necessarily given up on her, but she is tiered down a lot more than where she has been. Set 5 is just kind of so crazy that it breaks certain matchups in some pretty bad ways, and yeah. Last but not least, for the proper teams, this is a kind of revival of an old concept. I know you see BT1 and a lot of people won't have BT1. This used to be Cyanide Django, and this could still be Cyanide Django. All this slot really is just a scoundrel with a good damage basic. BT1 being the king of basic damage. You get the idea pretty quickly. Can definitely just dump it out. But yeah, this is a revival of an old way for Dash to try to, I mean, ideally I would say a block, but holistically it's more just like tax the hell out of Traya. I was hoping to see how this would interact with bonus Dash, and I actually thought that this seems pretty promising at first. Unfortunately, it does still seem like it's kind of just taking her to tax, not really doing much more than that. I think more interestingly for Dash is going to be what happens when Traya Omicron hits in week 3. Because suddenly, Traya against Dash becomes like, Traya's overqualified for that, right? Traya's like a galactic legend killer. And I mean, if you get their Traya with your Dash, you would be happy with that. This might be 1 week early to start running Dash, but I want to make sure that you all are thinking about that going into week 3. Is, I guess we might not necessarily even end up running this setup because it's anti-Traya and because we don't really care if they Traya in week 3. But for now, it's something I'm messing with. It has gotten some good bleed, and it's not bad. Earned some opponent respect, but we'll see what happens. And yeah, the rest of this is still kind of pretty old teams, mostly just modernized, updated, you know. Set 3 to set 5 was a pretty clean transition for a lot of these teams, you know, armor to armor. Sortie, you know, you can either go crit damage or health and armor if you're trying to time out Wampa, and so on. Nothing too crazy to talk about here. But yeah, I will put my match history down in the description if you want to poke at it yourself and see what's up. There's some things I'm still trying to work at and solve for that I haven't included. Again, this is kind of one of the first meta forecasts where I'm not necessarily running everything that I show you here, but there's a lot to talk about and cover here, and so I think this is a good use case example for all the different things that you can be trying. And I just want to make sure you're aware of the choices. So yeah, that'll be it for this week. I think it's pretty likely that we'll have to do another update next week, unless none of the angles play out. But for everything that I'm trying, if nothing plays out by next week, I would be a little bit disappointed. Anyway, I gotta go ready for the TB stream, so thank you all for watching. Peace out.